Welcome to In the Gym with Michael Petrella. On today's episode, we're going to be interviewing a very special guest. We have Randy Roach for a sit-down interview. Now, for those who don't know Randy, he's regarded by many as the foremost authority on iron game history. He is also the author of Muscle, Smoke and Mirrors Volume 1 and Volume 2. He's going to be discussing with us some of the techniques used by the bodybuilders, both before and after the steroid era. He's also going to be showing us a little bit about his own training in his private gym setting. Today we have a very special guest. To my right is Randy Roach. He is the author of Muscle, Smoke and Mirrors Volume 1 and Volume 2. One of the best written books in the fitness industry regarding the history. His knowledge is unsurpassed in my opinion. We're very fortunate to have him on the show, and we're going to talk a little bit about different training methods over the years, what people are doing today, what they were doing 50 years ago and beyond. So Randy, I appreciate you being on, and by all means we're lucky to have your knowledge.
Well, you have quite a bit of knowledge yourself, but
thank you.
I just had the opportunity to talk to a lot of the old timers. I spoke to even a few who are on Muscle Beach who are now passed away. So because this project goes back 10 years, and it was interesting to see how the training evolved. And the books cover everything in terms of the origins of the sport, the nutrition back in that time, obviously the insurgence of steroids and drugs and the supplements. But I know with your program, you're looking at a lot about training. And the way people train today is so much. There are certain aspects of what people are doing today all through the 20th century, but the manner in which the strength train today is quite a bit different, and is compared to what they say, going back to Bernard McFadden. Bernard McFadden was considered the father of physical culture. Yep. He ran magazines way back at the beginning of the century. Eugene Sandow. There was a lot of odd lifting going on, but that kind of got trimmed down into Olympic weightlifting, the clean and jerk and the snatch. But today, the bodybuilding, which really the books are about the history of bodybuilding, the way they built muscle and conditioned themselves, is kind of getting all thrown out now. Everybody's doing everything different. The machines that came into the industry about 40 years ago and really offered a lot of variety and options for people who aren't very coordinated. And they were done with a purpose that we're actually, I think in many ways, can be better than the barbell and dumbbell, like Arthur Jones, who started them. That was his intention. And the machine industry is involved, but it's all getting thrown away because everybody is doing these catapult chin-ups.
Yep, kipping.
Yeah, I don't even know some of the terminology because I can't see exactly what they're doing, but I have a good idea what they're doing. But everything has to be momentum. Everything has to be explosive. And if you're competing, the CrossFit is the main one today.
Yep, very popular right now. And
I would say if you are competing in it, then you have no choice yet. You can train that way. But for the average person, I'd say 80 to 95% of the population who wants to either just build muscle or get conditioned, they don't need to put themselves at that risk because they eventually will get hurt.
Oh, I agree. We've seen a lot of injuries recently in the fitness industry. Unfortunately, we've actually had some fatalities in the weight room as of late, and a lot of it, in my opinion, could have been prevented. And we really are seeing this movement towards ballistic movement, and the whole subject of training for explosive makes you explosive. I mean, as you talk about in the book, that goes back, well, long before I was born.
Yeah, there's a lot of philosophies that have held on. You know, Arthur Jones had his philosophy, and Vince Gironda has his, even though they had some commonality. But I'm talking about some of the original players of what's called iron game, physical culture, the fitness industry. It's all grouped under the fitness industry today. But it went under the iron game or physical culture. And the bodybuilders really got beat up, you know, because they built muscle. But these guys were actually back in the 50s and 60s. They developed a manner of training that was in many ways very safe, and it gave them what they wanted. It gave them conditioning, it gave them muscle, it changed their bodies. And that's what most people want primarily today. They want to go in the gym and rechange their bodies, but they don't want to be called bodybuilders, but in actuality they are.
Right.
Because anybody who goes in there to change their body with anything is basically a bodybuilder in a sense. But everybody thinks of competitive bodybuilding today with all the stigmas that have been surrounded with it, which are usually all negative.
Right.
But those guys did have this great connection with their body. They really actually knew how to listen to themselves. Mm-hmm. Today we're in a culture where it's just numbers. We have numbers that will tell you if you're sick, even if you feel great. Your numbers, your cholesterol numbers, your blood pressure numbers, because we defined it this way. We defined you as sick.
Right.
And we do the same with conditioning, right? We don't listen to our bodies. We let numbers tell us.
Right.
Okay, is your pulse rate this? Is your VO2 max this? And they tell us if we're healthy. But we're not relying on it, listening to ourselves. We're listening to other people, and their numbers and their formulas tell us if we're healthy. Where these guys back then, they just got in tune with their body, and they had a great connection. And a lot of those guys are 70s, 80s, and still training today.
That's great to hear. Now, back, we're talking pre-steroid era. We're talking the 40s and the 50s. What was the predominant method of training? What were the champions doing back then?
Back, bodybuilding began, the competitive bodybuilding began in the very early 40s, late 30s, early 40s. And because Bob Hoffman, who raised American weightlifting up through the 30s and the 40s, he had control of weightlifting in the AAU, so he had control of bodybuilding. So there was a lot of crossover. So a lot of the bodybuilders did weightlifting at that time. Mm-hmm. But through the 40s, near the late 40s and 50s, the bodybuilders were pushing away to do more specific training because it was very difficult to be really good at weightlifting and really good at bodybuilding because genetics determine many of these things, right?
Now, when you say specific training, what do you mean by that?
The bodybuilders were becoming more in tune with all the muscles of their body and how to train them most effectively, where the weightlifters were in tune with how do I get that weight over my head.
Right.
Then that's the main thing. They had to clean and the jerk and the press. And the press was still a common denominator between bodybuilding and weightlifting, but the clean and jerk and the snatch just weren't necessary in bodybuilding. And like I still say today, they're not necessary in all the strength training going on today. But those early weightlifters from York happened to become some of our very first strength coaches in NFL.
Right.
And that's why it has that foundation in strength training. But Arthur Jones, who created Nautilus machines, he came along basically in the early 70s. He had a totally different philosophy that, we could go on for hours just talking about the differences there. But bodybuilding in the 40s and 50s, they still didn't have the concept of strength training for sports. Bob Hoffman did. Back in the mid-30s, he was still saying weightlifting could be good for other sports. But the general public, the physicians, no way. They just not the general physical education instructors. They would not buy into that, and not at least to the late 70s, early 80s. So it wasn't really being used as an enhancer for other sports. It was just bodybuilders and weightlifters competing in weightlifting and bodybuilding. If they could do both, fine. But by the end of the 40s, they weren't doing both anymore so much. They were splitting into their own sports.
Right. I know that even today, actually I had a young athlete come into the gym. And I was talking with his father, and he was being told by somebody in his immediate circle that if the athlete became too muscular or he somehow got too strong in the gym, this was going to slow him down. And this goes back to the old idea that if you became muscle bound, it would somehow have a detrimental effect on athletic performance. Now, we both know that is untrue, that most professional teams, some very high-level athletic organizations, they have excellent strength and conditioning programs. But it's amazing to see that those myths still exist today.
Oh yeah, and what's funny is they call them muscle bound and muscle binding, and they couldn't define it back then either. You go back to the 30s and 40s, and I forget the one student, he wrote to several prominent physiologists or physical educators and asked for them to define it. I forget how many people he sent this question out, and it came back in all sorts of different definitions of it. So there was no official muscle bound, muscle binding definition for it. It was just a belief that came about that these big muscles were going to slow you down, even though John Gremick and John Davis, these were two weightlifting champs of that day, were going around universities demonstrating their absolute effect. I think Gremick could do the full splits and a backwards somersault. John Davis could do all sorts of different things to show that these guys are by no means clumsy or bound up from and these guys both had great physiques, right?
Right.
And they were natural bodybuilders. See, they can make that argument today with these guys walking around at 300 pounds full of drugs, right? I mean, that's not going to function for them anywhere else but on that stage.
Right.
So, but yeah, that's probably why it still hangs around. Because you look at those guys today, you know, to give people an example, bodybuilding today, Arnold Schwarzenegger was just under 6'2", and he competed at 225.
And he was huge back then.
Yeah, and he still is huge when you look back then. But now, what was Ronnie Coleman and Jake Cutler both at like Cutler at 5'9", 286 pounds.
Yep.
Do the math on that. Like, I mean, that's crazy. So, you know, some of these guys pose up there for 10 minutes and they're wiped. They're done. They can't do anything else. Right? It's just. That's, I think, why you still have people believe in muscle bound, because they probably have a point now.
Now I want to shift gears here for a minute. I want to talk a little bit about nutrition, about sports supplements, and how they came to be really the driving force in the fitness community. Maybe what your take is on that, and you know, what some of the champions were doing at different eras.
Well, the supplements came in 1950 through Irvin Johnson, who would go on in California later on to become Rio H. Blair. And why they took off is because it was the biggest financial boon to hit the industry ever. Because you can only buy one set of barbells and they'll last you for life.
Right.
But if you buy supplements, you need them every single month. And so, some of the fathers of the sport poo-pooed them coming in at first. They don't need them, because for the first 50 years, everything was do resistance training, and eat whole natural foods, get outside, fresh air, and that's all you need. And it was good advice. But then, and so they said, we don't need these food fractions. These are food pieces coming into the game.
Right.
But then they kind of thought, look at the money being made off these things. So they kind of latched on to what was a concern at the time, legitimate concern, and that was the eroding of our soils.
Right.
So our foods weren't carrying the same amount of nutrition, and that was true, as they used to several decades back. So that was their catch, that was their latch. And even guys like Perry Rader and came in and they started buying into the supplements much, much more. Now some of them absolutely came to believe in how good they were, but a lot of it was coming out of industrial waste.
Right.
Such as soy protein for the first 50 years was an industrial product. They either buried the meal, they wanted the oils for grease and paint. Then when the hydrogenation process came in better, when they were this oil was becoming into the food industry. But then they looked at, why are we burying this meal or feeding it to animals? We should sell it to the public, right? And that's Irvin Johnson was very early in 1950, came in with soy protein, but he jumped it pretty fast and worked with the Wander Company and Ovaltine, and really good, and created his own milk and egg protein. But it came in a lot because of the money.
Right.
And it just rules the industry today. It drives the entire industry. It's all about selling supplements.
Right. Right. And again, the money is just it's bigger than most people believe. From your point of view, are you taking many supplements? Are you eating whole foods? What are you personally doing?
Well, most people who know me now know that I eat raw foods, and no, right now I'm not taking any supplements. I have taken like a fermented cod liver oil, maybe a product like Radiant C that has just it's a powder of the plant. It's not an extract from the plant or a piece of the plant. It is the plant that just happens to have a lot of full complex vitamin C. But right now I'm not taking anything because I just don't believe in the philosophy of it. People disagree with me. I got friends in the industry, and that's fine. But until they do the proper studies, such as what Dr. Francis Pottinger did, Dr. Rod McCarrison did, of course, they use animals to show whether processed foods can be very detrimental to our health. But nobody wants to do those studies.
Right.
because they just like the way things are. We're not talking about thousands of dollars here. We're talking about tens of millions for a company these years, right?
Right.
Even $100 million, they make that much money in selling this stuff.
Right.
And it's just taken over the whole industry, the magazines and the websites. They just want everybody selling supplements.
Right. That's perfect. I thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today. It's always fantastic to hear from you. Again, anybody looking for more information, Randy has wrote Muscle Smoke and Mirrors, Volume 1 and 2. When we're talking about the history of the iron game, there's no better source, in my opinion. It's going to open up a lot of people's eyes to what's going on, where we came from, why we are where we are today. And Randy, again, I can't thank you enough for being on the show today.
Hey Mike, we were in the last segment you were interviewing me, we were talking about the way training has evolved and how the gym, the contents of the gym have changed quite a bit. For me, it's even more different because of the fact that I can't see. And you might notice my orange tape on the floor. This allows me at times, because my vision does fluctuate, I won't always have to use the stick. In fact, most of the time I don't. Today I'm using it because that light really throws me off. But if you notice, that I got black rubber and all my bench, I only use the one bench and it's white because I can actually see this white on the black. And when it was just a black bench on black rubber, I was on the floor more than I was on my feet. So this was one of my best ideas that I've done. My gym is set up for me. I am an old-fashioned trainer, more of a kind of a philosophical combination of Vince and Arthur, I guess. But today we're arguing about, we're not arguing, but people are debating about old-time bodybuilding versus CrossFit training versus all this different functional training where everybody's on wobble boards and balls and stuff. But I still agree and like to train the old style with the guys that have been doing it for decades and almost a century. It's tried and proven. That's barbells, dumbbells, and quality machines, variable resistance machines. And even in that school, there's a lot of argument over which is better, free weights or machines, where I don't even debate that because they're all tools and they're all really good tools and they're all very valuable. When you're dealing with a cross-section of the population, you get all different variances in what people can do. Coordination-wise, bone mechanics, and the machines come in very, very handy for many different people. So I have I think some of the best equipment thanks to Mike, who's helped me find and track these things down and bring them in. From MedX to Nautilus, this equipment was designed by the forefather of variable resistance machines, Arthur Jones. And I also have Pendulum and some Atlantis. And I probably have 50 different stations. Some of them we built. I have welders that build equipment for me. These racks, these pulling machines over here. There's a number of machines that I've had custom built. And I have certain bars that are help in terms of protecting the elbows and the joints. Through the years, I've injured myself quite a bit, just in terms of even curling, sometimes even with a straight bar, to doing pull downs where I've got different bends in the bars that turn the elbow just certain ways, and that to keep these injuries from happening. The problem with training today, people are doing everything very ballistic and catapulting themselves up in chin-ups and dropping themselves to the floor and push-ups, and they're doing, I'm going to use this as a barbell, what's called a push press, is where they're doing a fairly heavy weight and they're pushing overhead. And the problem with that is as they compete with each other all the time and going heavier and heavier, it turns into a bent over bench press, and usually injury to the back and the shoulders, where a safer way is just behind the head, slow control for 20 to 25 reps, and it is far safer. It's going to probably be more efficient at building muscle than the other way, because the way they're doing it and cheating and with using the momentum, it's often just counterproductive. So, like I said, it's an industry rife with commercialism, gimmicks. They gimmick sell, say everybody wants to sell something new, so they got the P90X out there, the Insanity, the CrossFit, functional training, where I just haven't bought into it, probably because a lot of that training too, I read as a blind guy, I can't really participate in. But I still say the best for strength training and building muscle is the old style barbells, dumbbells, and the good equipment, the machines, and done in a controlled environment where the muscle is isolated, or the muscle groups are isolated and allowed to do the work, that the muscles work, the weights and the resistance, not you trying to incorporate every single muscle that just catapult yourself and using momentum, because yeah, you get conditioned, but you eventually just get going to hurt doing that kind of thing. So I say everything's set up. I got a lot of stations down here. I do, you probably won't notice, I probably got 13 different chinning stations with different various grips and stuff. And I do believe in strengthening, a lot of stuff based on core movement, and there's a lot of good exercise that can be done safely to work the core without jeopardizing. Even people doing all these planks and side planks are hurting their shoulders and putting themselves in awkward positions and stuff, where I just find there's safer ways of doing it. And it's even in the way I train, there's no guarantee something's going to happen, not happen, because you're lifting weights, so that's always going to be a potential for that. And there are exercises where I'll take somebody to the point where I'll say, look, at this point you're lifting a pretty good heavy weight. I can't guarantee your safety. If you want to go heavier, that's up to you. They're responsible, and they'll decide whether they're happy with that weight that they're lifting, or they want to go heavier. So it's a tough environment to keep people safe in the first place. I don't know why they're trying to make everything more risky and dangerous today, where you can't use a bench. You have to be destabilized to do everything, and you have to be on a ball or a teeter board or whatever else if they're doing in terms of flipping tires and stuff like that. But like I said, unless you're going to compete in that certain sport, then sure, you have to do it, because it's the only way you're going to get good at it is practicing it. But
I want to finish this episode with another special thanks to Randy Roach for allowing us to come into his private gym and interview him. If you want more information on his books, Muscle, Smoke and Mirrors Volume 1 and 2, please visit his website, www.musclesmokeandmirrors.com. Also, if you have any questions or comments on today's show, please contact me directly at our website, www.stgstrengthandpower.com.